Je pense donc je suis. I think.
Okay.
Therefore, I am. When people can take care of their appetitive needs, then they develop the competence and rationality to engage on things that are just beyond the stomach to pursue actualization. Project sustainability is so difficult because funding is usually limited. And you cannot do beyond what you are empowered to do.
True.
No matter how motivated you are. You are only able to facilitate a process of ease of doing business through policy.
Yes.
And that policy engagement can only come when you are in the civic or political space.
True.
The political space determines the leadership. The leadership determines policy. So if you engage on politics, then you are able to define your outcomes.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Youthacy on Ready to Talk TV and podcast. My name is Ifunanya Njoka, your host. On this show, we empower young people to be effective community organizers, democratic mobilizers, and productive change agents. Today, we're going to be talking about youth empowerment initiatives, highlighting programs and initiatives with the potential to empower young individuals both economically and politically. I have a seasoned guest with me. In fact, she is currently on her doctoral program at the university. She is smart, and I cannot wait for you guys to meet her. As we normally do, I will let her do the honors of introducing herself, tell us about her work, and we'll take conversations right from there. Miss Glory, nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell us about you, your name, and the work that you do.
Okay, I'm Glory Ukwenga. I'm the founder of Africana League. We're a youth network across Africa where we empower young people with the civic engagement spaces to understand and engage on issues of active citizenship, nation building, as well as mobilization for community development.
That's interesting. Do you want to tell us some of your empowerment programs that you've carried out successfully?
We have, first and foremost, what we call civic leadership clubs. These are established in schools, in institutions of learning, and in local communities. Young people learn how to analyze political issues and how to carry out community development projects. We also have a program called Youth Leaders Arise. And what we do is we go to communities to actually stimulate and inspire them to engage actively in policy making and political processes, and to get themselves out there, as potential leaders that can be up for elections or appointments. I think those are two things that fit specifically to this conversation.
That is very impressive. One thing that we talk about a lot on this show is how education is important. Any conversation we're having, youth, democracy building, activism, whatever it is, education is important. And it's interesting to see that you have clubs in schools. Are they tertiary institution or secondary school?
Secondary and tertiary.
Oh, wow. So there are young people in secondary schools that are part of these clubs that know what is going on when it comes to empowerment and citizenship.
That's right. We want to build that capacity from the early age.
That's really beautiful. I think that's amazing. And so can you share, some other youth-led successful initiatives like this that ensure youth empowerment that have been successful in the past?
I would like to commend, for instance, the initiative of Yaga Africa that actually pushed for the Not Too Young to Run bill that was eventually signed in 2018. And what that has achieved now is that from the age of 25, young people can contest for political positions like local government chairman, state assemblies and all of that. So I think that's one thing that stands out for me and inspires my work. Just as you guys do here, your organization is ready to lead.
Yes.
We want to be able to leverage on past engagements to see that young people are able to draw strength from certain policies that have been put out there and worked out by other people, to facilitate their own process of becoming.
Oh, okay. That's facilitate their process of becoming. It's very important that we have people facilitating the process of other people's becoming, you know. You are running a very successful initiative, I believe, the club thing in schools. I think it's such an excellent idea and thing that you're doing in your organization. So what would you say is an element, what makes up the components of actually running a successful youth empowerment initiative? What must we put into consideration to run a successful youth empowerment initiative?
What I would consider the anchors of a successful youth empowerment initiative would be, first, that it enables people to build skills. If it is directed towards the economic angle, then it should also ensure that it builds the capacity of people to survive. And then whatever the results should be defined in a manner that the youth who are beneficiaries are able to run with it beyond the idea of the program itself. So that's sustainability. So these three things: survival, skills building, sustainability, and then the issue of networking, which in itself is a skill. But the young persons, whether in politics or in economical engagements, must learn how to partner, network, collaborate with others for the actualization of their common purpose.
Absolutely agree. So, you spoke about whether it's politically driven or economically driven, So how can economic empowerment actually impact political engagement and vice versa? Because they're like two different worlds. So how do they marry each other?
Economy enables you to get the bread.
True.
What that means is that, first and foremost, the individual in the process of being empowered is able to survive. When people can take care of their appetitive needs, then they develop the competence and rationality to engage on things that are just beyond the stomach, the survival, immediate security issues to pursue actualization. Then the economic empowerment would also ensure that people build resources that they can leverage for engagement. Because whether you are engaging as an entrepreneur or whether you are engaging in the field of politics, you as we say, you need money to find money. And then if it's in politics, you still do need money to be able to attain certain levels of goal attainment.
Absolutely.
You understand? So to that extent, I would say the significance is very high. The other thing that economic empowerment does in impacting on the the political engagement of a young person would be confidence building. Because, when you have the command of resources, naturally, the confidence, the charisma, the aura that you accumulate through the learning curves of trying to actually get that resources, acquire that resource, would enable you to engage with a lot of confidence when in the political space. And on the contrary, politics, yes, does impact on the economy. How so? If a young person is engaging actively on the political space, then they are better able to drive policy making that benefits, creates a good environment for them, either as young people or for the general citizenry, to achieve their aims. There's this concept of ease of doing business. You are only able to facilitate a process of ease of doing business through policy.
Yes.
And that policy engagement can only come when you are in the civic or political space.
True.
Right.
True.
So the more you are able to gain inroads into that space, then you can lobby or influence the policy outcomes one way or the other to make the environment conducive for whatever ideas you have, whether for being employed, an employee of labor, or for being an entrepreneur to drive a business and for that business to thrive. So naturally, the political space determines the leadership. The leadership determines policy. So if you engage on politics, then you are able to define your outcomes.
I absolutely agree. There's a lot of ways you can marry the two. You spoke about policy, and I'd just like us to stay here for a minute. I believe there's some government policies that enhance economic engagements, right? how can these policies be improved? Or do you think that they are actually in a space or in a place where they are good enough? Or are there ways and means that these policies can actually be improved so that people who are on the economic side of things can have better engagement?
One thing I would say is that we are constantly learning in this experimentation of democracy. And so
experimentation of democracy
in Nigeria,
yeah.
Yes. And I have found that the government has, consistently tried to expand the bandwidth of those who are engaged in policy-making process. You find that many policies nowadays go through engagement with private sector people, key stakeholders, including civil society organizations, making inputs, academics coming in as consultants, and of course, professionals in both the private sector and the government spaces themselves. So normally, the challenge is how do we transform our beautiful policies from just being paper tigers to being things that actually impact on the people. One of the policies I know that government has instituted over time to enable youth empowerment is the National Youth Policy.
Okay.
This started from 1981 and it was recently reviewed in 2019 by the former minister Solomon Lalong.
Okay.
And I remember that one of the key things they wanted to adjust was the policy focus of ensuring that the age of impact of youth policy should move from 18 to 35 as pursued by the African Union to 15 to 29.
Oh, wow.
Now, I can understand the motivation behind that, which is that when you look at many youth empowerment programs and projects, it is the older category of youth who you find in the spaces as beneficiaries. The people 15 to 29, especially 15 to 25, in fact, 15 to 24 are hardly in that space because for the United Nations, the benchmark is 24.
Okay.
Yes. So you find that those people, when you say there is a youth program, you hardly find young people of that age seated or coming up as beneficiaries. It's usually the older, late 20s and 30s category.
Yes.
And one of the things that they wanted to do in that review was to ensure that older adults disguising as youth, that's the language that was used in that document. You are not necessarily the beneficiaries, but actual core young people,
yes,
to bring them into the spaces benefiting as young people. But for me, I have an issue with that. You see, as a deviation from the age norm of the United Nations capping it at 24, African Union intentionally moved it to 35 because the reality in Africa shows that young people don't have, by virtue of our sociocultural norms, we do not have early preparation for life after being parented.
Mm-hmm.
So that means the average young person from the age of 15, unless, through programs that we're now engaging on, they're not necessarily prepared to identify opportunities and leverage them for personal development.
That's true.
When it comes to them, you would take twice as much effort to achieve results because most times they see these things as programs that they can take for granted. But the older youth know that they are more aware of the opportunities that they have missed out on.
Yes.
They have explored life. They might have had more exposure to interact with people across cultures and societies. And they've seen that, the idea of youth ought to be doing this and that, by so age. So they are in a hurry. Therefore, they have more likelihood and awareness to identify opportunities and take advantage of them to achieve results. You see? So for me, there is still a need to go easy on that in accommodating the broader spectrum of young people. If you go to developed climes like the Western Europe, for instance, at 18, they're kicking you out of the house. in Nigerian homes, a 24-year-old might still be struggling to gain admission.
True.
And
Very
the reality of gaining admission may just not be about their grades, but it may actually be about the system with corruption and other related challenges not working for them to actually gain this admission. Because I particularly was a victim. I recall that, I spent 3 solid years at home wanting to study law, okay? I recall that in one of the universities, I just don't want to say their name so that I don't defame them.
You understand?
And this is supposed to be a university of my catchment area. My father, I got a very high score in the post-jam. I think I failed only 2 questions because from when I came back home and I reviewed, because that was 2005 when they just started the post-jam thing.
Okay.
I got about 255 or so in jam itself. You see that, which was a first score.
Yes, actually.
So I, got into the school to find out that my name wasn't anywhere on the list. And my father approached a woman. And guess what she said my father should bring? Because he was directed to this woman who was supposedly in position to answer that question. He was told to bring 7 bags of Caprice gold rice.
Specific.
Yes. 10 bags. So at that time, each bag was about 7,000 naira. So the woman, I was there. I was with him.
Wow.
So she asked my father, what do you do? My father says, we have a business where we sell, food items as wholesale. So she said, you will send 10 bags of Caprice gold rice. At that time, Caprice gold was the biggest, the best rice in stock. So you could see the reality. Here are parents who at that time never thought, they should worry about bribing anybody. So, he was repugnant and he came home with defiance and said, never. Like joke. Same thing with my own states. I went, I got a very high score, 87% in post-jam. First list, second list, third list. My name never came out. How do I explain that? You see? So by the time I get admission, I had to go to a private university, number 1. And 2, I was ready to study anything. I had left my dream of law. And the first course that seemed like it, I was off.
Went to it.
Because if you offered me Yoruba, I would have accepted at time. So back to the point. Having lost 3 years for no justifiable reason, because again, the third university I tried was LASU. And I had issues of communication. We were never told the dates of the post-UME. The day I went there to check was the day they told me that they had done post-UME yesterday. Nobody communicated to us, no text messages, nothing.
Oh, wow.
So whatever reasons be the case, the young person's opportunity is already slowed down.
That's true.
You see?
That's true.
And honestly, of all my siblings, it was just one of, in fact, none of them actually gained admission through the regular process of university. My other brother did part-time. 2 of my younger ones entered through pre-degree. These are high flyers. I can tell, especially the one behind me. He got honored by junior WAEC. Is that what they call it in those days? Yeah, he was one of the brightest students. So you know that it's not a question of the intellect.
Yes.
So this is the reality. Young people are slowed down based on these realities. We start late to assess opportunities. And therefore, I think that that's one of the gaps that I have identified so far that governments should revisit.
Thank you so much. You've shared very interesting stories. Thank you so much for sharing. So there are a lot of problems that need to be solved, right? And I imagine that a lot of young people are interested in solving these problems. But what are some challenges that youth empowerment initiatives face and how can they be solved? Because someone might be thinking, I understand that there's a problem of getting people into the university and I want to try to solve this. But then there's just so many challenges that they cannot surmount. So how can these challenges be addressed? And what are some of the challenges you have been able to identify?
One of the challenges I observed is the issue of limited spread of impact. So usually you itemize your program, you go into the community or wherever it is that you have to impact, and then you find that there are more people that you need to reach. You would only cover a tiny bit of the population. Project sustainability is so difficult because also funding is usually limited. And you cannot do beyond what you are empowered to do.
True.
No matter how motivated you are.
Mm.
Then there is the gap in terms of orientation and information. So when you gain entry into communities, you have to start from the basics of explaining the why, of explaining why you need it. Most times, even when you do needs assessment, you find that community people, well, the field in which Africana League plays, are not able to effectively articulate their needs. You also find that one of the key problems of that articulation is that there's usually a lot of gaps between the youth and the leaders of the community. So sometimes you want to do this. Some young people are interested in it. By the time they get to their leaders, the leaders are divided. You first have to walk through the underlying issues in those communities to resolve their internal intra-community grievances before you come to the issue of the project. That is, if you want to make lasting impact, not just put people together, do a ceremony, snap pictures, and send a report that you did program.
Yeah, lasting impact.
Do you understand?
Yes.
So, basically, these are some of the issues that we have identified. And resolving it, yes, I mean, it takes dexterity and skill to, first of all, be able to interact with the community just beyond the surface issues of programming. You have to intentionally build relationships within the community so that they can trust you enough to make you understand the root problems behind certain issues. That's how we make progress at Africana League. So we find ourselves getting into, what do we call it? Relating strategically with their leaders first to get the buy-in so that the response of, positive consent can come in. Then something else that young people can do is also to keep on leveraging networking and partnerships. Because with more resources, you can do more, you can spread the impact over time, I think I'll stop there on that question.
I think it's when we're having conversations like this, things around networking and partnership always comes up. But I strongly believe, because I've had conversations with young people trying to do things, I know people struggle with networking and creating sustainable strategic partnership, right? So how can young people work around this to ensure that they actually properly and effectively network and create partnerships for their initiatives? So like, what are tips that you can give for effective networking and partnership creation?
Number one rule is to get out of the house and engage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course. Yes.
You want an opportunity, you're not attending events, you are invited, you don't show up, you always have a good reason not to. You have to, cut your excuses.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is to work on inbuilt confidence. Here's the trick for me. I realized that if you look to people for external validation of who you are, you will always be too self-conscious to walk up to people and introduce yourself. So you have to build, your confidence. And confidence comes from knowledge and real capacity. When you know that you have applied yourself to solving a problem, that you've done it, whether you know it or not, you've passed through a certain learning curve. Say you want to do a little project. You had to speak to somebody on how to start. You have to call somebody to call the next person to gather more people for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's mobilization. Nobody taught you in class tied to mobilization for,
True.
But you already gained that as a skill. The more you are able to do that, the more you build in the confidence to engage on the next person. Why? Because when you now have something to say when they ask you who you are. And which brings me to the last thing. You then have to intentionally curate who you are. This is what it is I represent. This is the why of my existence. We say cogito ergo sum. Je pense donc je suis. I think.
Okay.
Therefore, I am.
Mm.
Yeah. So you should know that you think, you have the capacity to think. But what is it that you think about? And why do you think about these things? And most importantly, what is it that you've done that forms your dossier of establishing your identity in society? Once you have that in place, you can walk in anywhere. And when you do walk in anywhere, engage, like actually walk up to people, your role models, your mentors, those who speak at events, walk up to them. Most of them wouldn't be as snobbish as you would anticipate them to be. They'll be nice. True. Because they started like you one time at a point from naivety and then grew out of that. So they're usually willing to engage.
I absolutely agree. When speaking from personal experience, I've approached people that I didn't think they would be as receptive as they were, and they were just very receptive. And it made me realize and understand that we just have a preconceived expectation and notion of certain people, but you just have to truly give room for chance. Just, go there, do it. What's the worst that could happen, So I absolutely agree with that. I think you've done such interesting and amazing work. And even while here with me in the studio, your storytelling has just been really beautiful. So how can people leverage storytelling and media to actually tell their stories and do more work around youth empowerment initiatives? Because people have great stories, people have done a lot of things, but they may not just be able to express it. Maybe meeting partners in some of these events, writing on LinkedIn, on Instagram, to whatever platform they'd like to write. Like, how can storytelling and media be harnessed effectively for youth empowerment initiatives?
Well, we're born in the right generation where there is social media now.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike when, the traditional media or dissemination of information used to be the exclusive preserve of the traditional media, like radio,
television,
newspaper,
yeah,
and at worst, magazines.
That's true.
Now you have an opportunity in this jet age to tell your story even from your room. So if you have a phone, you actually have the capacity to ask yourself, who are you? Just as I had mentioned earlier, define those things, write them out if possible so that you can rehearse them until the point where you know who you are. And then start to share your story. This is one thing I have realized. People are waiting to be perfect. But for every great person and every great organization and every great brand, whether they are individuals or organizations, there is usually the pictures that weren't supposed to be classified as elegant pictures. There is one picture taken in the midnight with low lighting and poor quality editing. They're those stories. And in this day and age, people aren't as sensitive towards expertise. People are more interested in your personality, no matter the rot of your background. So it's all about confidence to really put yourself out there. So you can take advantage of the different social media platforms. We have LinkedIn for professional stories.
Yes.
We have Twitter for just short messaging, but in a coherent manner that you can sustain to build an audience and give specific opinions on issues that you want to be relevant in. You have YouTube where you can create things that look like a documentary of your life, even if it's just a documentary of your day.
A day in the life of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can do that. Then you can leverage Instagram, which is basically where you tell the story. The Instagram is for the story, the before and the after of your the transformation that you have made, in society, and the transformation that you have undergone as an agent of change.
Yes.
Or as a youth, trying to make impact in society.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the benefits of AI, which is becoming explored. And what artificial intelligence does is to give us opportunities to leverage the robotic intelligence of skills that we do not have and don't have the capacity to bother to learn.
To build, yes.
So for every skill out there, whether it is copywriting, or it is graphics design, or it is video editing, or it is transcription, there are AI tools that you can use. The famous I can recall now is ChatGPT, right?
ChatGPT. There's
but
Gemini.
There's
There's
Canva
even
for
Meta AI.
graphics design.
Yeah.
There's so many of them. But you have to, as simple as Googling what are relevant AI tools for this skill.
For XYZ.
You could find it.
Yeah.
You could have them literally set up a calendar for you to even tell the stories. You could schedule the stories, having set up these stories, and they will just be self-executing, automated, and put out there on the space. So this is important. Well, the second thing is you actually have to do something with your life.
Okay.
Because it is what you're doing with your life that constitutes your story. The story that you tell then define your value to society. Yeah, so you leverage the tools that we have now, thankfully, not still neglecting the traditional media. And one of the things that we have done so far is to build network, and partnership relationships with traditional media organizations. So you have an event. Africana League.
Okay.
You have an event, you get them to cover it. You have an event, you get them to attend. If your impact is newsworthy, and really it should be, then they would likely respond because they need information, they need content. And if you're even smart, there are ways you can leverage and sell the content, and then be paid to tell your story, to live your life. People are benefiting from this. And I say this particularly of importance because I would love to see a society that is deviating from the impact and emphasis on the stories that degrade our society, that chew into the moral fabric of our society and makes us naked, makes us bankrupt of morals and bankrupt of ideas for national progress, to actually seeing more of young people stories engaging as positive nation builders in society. This is the drive of Africana League. This is what it is. That is our message. And this is what we are intentional in doing with our leaders in all the countries where we are represented.
That is just fantastic. That is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So I feel like we've neglected one part of the conversation, right? Because we've been speaking to people who are creating these initiatives and this program. But the people that are not interested in creating, right? They just want to participate to benefit in some of these youth empowerment programs. So as we wrap up this conversation, my next question to you will be, what advice do you have for young people who are interested in participating in or just benefiting from youth empowerment programs and initiatives?
Engage. It's as simple as that. The beauty of the strength that we have in our population as young people in Africa is also that we have a number of young people who are actually interested in the volunteering. And volunteering itself, I see it as a ministry. It's a calling. Just like in singing, some people are better as backups than being a lead. And this is usually my message to our members. You have to know where you fit in terms of nation building. There are those in front, the kings. There are those in the middle, the kingmakers. They do not have the charisma and ability to generate support for themselves. But they are usually able to feed, to get, people with the convening power to actually provide the necessary support. But then there are the supporters, the active supporters. And this is where you as a young person falls in. If you know that your role is actually to support, you need to be told what to do. You're not quite great at coming up with new ideas or even expressing them when you have, but you have a way of understanding a vision when it is put to you and running with it in a consistent manner that you can be depended upon to get that specific thing done. Put yourself out there because ultimately, the opportunities that are going to be open to you, whether they are for economic opportunities, such as being getting a job, driving your entrepreneurship initiative, or driving any unique idea in the civic space or political space, whatever it is that you want to engage on, there are usually opportunities that come with volunteering. One of such is that, especially for young school leavers, Volunteering gives you something reasonable to put in your CV.
True.
When you are identified with an organization for something that you have done, it means that you are somebody who is intentionally contributing to society, and therefore you can be more relied upon in organizations. So any serious-minded organization will normally look you up on Google to find out who you are. And most young people hardly engage. So there's usually nothing. You either show up on Facebook, where you are sharing careless pictures of yourself with some drunken friends or reckless friends in a party, or with some, appearance, some kind of clothes you define as fashion that doesn't represent what the organization who is planning to recruit you want to,
yes,
identify with. You see, which begins to already define your character. If you put in so much effort, then you're on Instagram. That's the average youth in Nigeria, right? If you engage in these spaces, then you actually have more professionally inclined things to put on these kinds of spaces as part of your story. Then if you're good enough, you have things you can put on LinkedIn and on Twitter. You begin to have opinions about issues. If you don't engage, you can hardly form opinion on issues of society, whether it is about politics or about economic issues, or about how economic issues or how policy issues are impacting on young people. You have no opinion because you don't even understand.
Yeah, true.
But the process of engagement, you pass through a learning curve, and that empowers you in itself to gain certain knowledge and skills that you can employ in terms of any engagement you find yourself.
I think you've just given us a masterclass here. I mean, there's just so much nuggets that both the beneficiaries and the providers of these initiatives can go home with in just listening to this. I think it's been so amazing. So finally, I'd like to ask, looking ahead, right? Looking at what is coming, at the emerging trends, what opportunities are there for young people, when it comes to conversations around youth empowerment initiatives?
Well, looking ahead, I see a lot of opportunities on the issue of climate and environment, especially as regards to climate entrepreneurship. The whole issue of recycling provides a lot of chain that we can leverage as young people. I do say this, that one of the advantages that we in Africa have right now is that having not successfully industrialized, we do have the opportunity to develop in a climate-friendly manner. That is, supposing we are blessed with leaders who understand the depth of these and can drive policy in this direction. But then, as private actors, you can come together to begin to research and engage on how you can, intentionally recycle for profits or for social enterprise. Then there is the issue of food security, which brings us to agriculture. We have always talked about that's on the international space now. We talk about the problem of distribution of food. Look at how the challenge of meats, tomatoes, price of staple commodities are ever on the increase. It is not that we do not have arable lands, but we don't have sufficient people engaging on them, okay? So as a young person, we need to have that culture where you see farming as something you can do even in your backyard, especially those of you who are living in communities or close to rural communities. There are usually spaces, they are there. I see them because I work there. Yes, don't be too proud to roll up your sleeves and plant a corn. You can eat it, and whether it's for subsistence. There are now opportunities and knowledge even on social media on how to grow some of these staple vegetables. Right in your house, putting bags, like the soil in bags, watering them.
Yes.
So even from your balcony or wherever, on any corner or your backyard, you can necessarily grow certain kinds of, even yam. I have seen yam. You see?
Wow.
So, yes.
Wow.
So maybe in youth programming, we need to look at how to step down these kinds of knowledge so that young people begin to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. But I want to mention, to be fair to us as young people, that the government has a role to play in security, especially on this issue of agriculture. Those who are engaging with these issues of farmer herders conflicts and unknown gunmen and all, these related issues that are impacting on the capacity of farmers to get on their farms, leading, of course, to increasing case of food scarcity and the rest in our country. The government has to be intentional and truthful. When I say government, please, I don't just mean the president. I am an advocate and given Africana League strategy for looking inwards right from the grassroots.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Okay? So I'm not just focusing on federal. I'm looking at the role of state governors. I'm looking at the role
local governments as well.
Yes, thankfully, we now have
autonomy.
At least on the financial and administrative angles for local governments.
Yes.
They have a role to play. They must identify it. They must ensure it. Also, the security agencies, all the actors in the spectrum of security have to be intentional. Then there is also the opportunity for ICT-related skills. There is significant global skills gap on the new angles of tech, especially with regards to artificial intelligence, that young people should also begin to focus on.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm sure everybody is watching has had such a great time. You are just a ball of knowledge. You shared a lot of tips, a lot of things that people should go back home, sit on, think on, and can take action on. In fact, so thank you so much, Ms. Glory. It has been an absolute pleasure having you here in the studio with me today. Do you have any final words
you for
our viewers?
Yes. At African League, we always say power belongs to us. What that means is your power to act, not just to sit and discuss, but to act for the change that you want to see as artisans.
Absolutely. Act for the change you want to see as artisans. I'm sure that you've had such a beautiful time today on Youthacy. Thank you for being with us. Of course, this remains Ready to Talk TV and podcast. And my name is Ifunanya Nduka. Until next time, bye-bye.